Let's click that off for a minute. Hello, hello. We are live here at Stone the Crone with HJ to do our review on the book that we've been reading for the last month, which is A Time to Think by Hannah Barnes. I've had mixed feelings
For the
reading this.
last month, which is A Time to Think.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Stone.
Gets us every time, mate. Gets me too. Gets me too. So yeah, I don't know about you, Heather, but I've had some real mixed feelings about reading this, where I've wanted to, my heart really goes out to those that this has happened to, as the same time really trying to grab the concept of the why. Again, it just reinforced to me the importance of the pronouns and why they can't be used, and how the system is a beast, isn't it? Isn't it the system a beast? So I'm going to
Once you're
hand it.
in that system too, the drive forward, you're already on a medical pathway. Once you're in that system, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Look, it's all over as soon as you or your parent have made that phone call.
Mhm. So yeah, I just so definitely, as FEMA pointed out earlier, in a stream of yours last week, it's definitely not bedtime reading. It's quite confronting. It's we'll just move to the first slide. Can you see that, Stone? I've just moved
Yeah.
to the
Hey
second
VS,
slide.
welcome. We're doing our book review of A Time to Think, and this is if you just popped in, we've only just started. We've only just gone live for a couple of minutes. So welcome, darling, and sit back, grab a coffee. If you want to take notes, do so, but you don't have to take any notes. No one has to take any
I
notes.
can make this PowerPoint available to everyone via the book club. That's no
Excellent.
problem. Via Stone's Twitter page. That's no problem. So you don't have to take notes. I can share. I'm happy to share this PowerPoint with you. So
well, that's a good thing about this video too, and the ongoing with this particular program we have is building this store of knowledge of these books. So I really appreciate you and your time for that, Heather, that you've done this week.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, just to give you a bit of a background about the book, it's based on the experiences of the clinicians who've worked directly with thousands of young people with gender-related distress or questioning their gender identity. The author contacted close to 60 clinicians who've worked at GIDS, which is the Gender Identity Service, as part of the Tavistock Portman Trust, as part of the NHS England, in an attempt to hear a broad range of voices. The testimony is double sourced. So all the information in this book is rock solid. Everyone interviewed in the book has either a direct experience, raised concerns with the TAVI, sought to improve the service, or has been directly involved in legal action. And the author does use pronouns in this book, and she makes that point up front. So I'll just warn anyone who's sensitive about that. She does use women's language for men, which, we can talk about that sort of towards the end of the book, how we all feel about that. But once we've gone through it, and all about so it was written before the closure to close GIDS was taken, before the decision to close GIDS was taken. So how did you go with your reading this week, everyone? Stone, how did you go?
I got it done, but I'm a very hands-on type of person, and I do. And as you said, it's not nighttime reading, and because I had a few things to do, I did finish my book off. I'm not going to lie, using a text to reader. So I did have the last bit of the book read to me over the last couple of days. So I have got that finished. Which I do recommend. If you are an arty, hands-on type person or a mum, your things that you got to, but you can't be holding to jump on and find an app that will read for you. So yes, I got it done, and I actually I did struggle a lot with the non-sex language, the gendered language, rather than the sex language. I found it very, very hard to actually keep my head into who we were talking about at any given time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So I just want us to think about the title of the book, A Time to Think, and about the number of times and the context in which the phrase was mentioned. Can you remember the first time in the book it was mentioned, Stone, or anyone in the chat? Can anyone remember what was the first contextual sort of meaning that time to think was brought up in the book?
It was just it was to allow the children to have a time to consider whether or not that was the path that they wanted to go down. So it was even before I think that there was a contemplation of the puberty blockers and giving them an extra little bit of time, because they right at the beginning they do 100% go into that the reversible when they're not so much reversible, the puberty blockers. So
Yeah,
it
correct.
was supposed to expand the time, and I would say that would purely be like with precocious puberty. They thought, well, look, we can just give them this for 6 months. That'll give them 6 months to think, but it didn't. It just didn't pan out that way at all.
The first time I remember it being brought up in the book is when they were talking about, because they didn't actually used to give puberty blockers to children because of the age of consent laws. So the first time I remember it being brought up was to be given to 16 to 18-year-olds. In the context that they would probably go on to become a trans adult, and the year or two on puberty blockers before they could go on to take cross-sex hormones at 18 years of age and get their surgeries would give them time to think away from the pressure of their natal puberty. So it was actually never given to children, except, as you mentioned, in the case of precocious puberty, but that was only for a very limited amount of time. So yeah, the meaning of the book, the meaning changes throughout the book, and then probably in the 2000s, it was all it changed to when we were prescribing puberty blockers to children, that this will give them time to think away from the pressures of a natal puberty. So they were just cancelling puberty altogether at that point. Yeah. And then by the end of the story, the title, sort of becomes about medical practice and are we hurting people, and is it time to stop and have a think about what we're doing?
I think myself too, which was all noble and well while the kids and the age of consent was 16 to 18. But as you go along the book, it becomes very clear, as it's fine saying the time to think, but as the age of, as the age of consent changed, and they were getting younger and younger people within GIDS.
No, they didn't. They didn't change the age of consent. So
they were getting younger and younger people through the door.
Yeah, correct. So the original vision at GIDS was, so GIDS was set up in 1989. And the emphasis would be in promoting the development of a young person's gender identity, not changing it. Staff were to maintain an open mind as to what the solution the young person might settle on, whether that to be medically transition or to reconcile with their own sex. When the clinic was originally set up, there were lots of questions about, are you creating a service and creating the problem. That question has always been raised about this service. At first, the clinicians noted that the first cohorts of kids coming to GIDS, this is right back in the 90s, really. It didn't open until 89. The first clinicians noticed that the kids had high rates of mental health comorbidities. The therapeutic watchful waiting model was used. Originally, the numbers were 4 in 30,000 children could experience this type of gender distress. They used Stoller's definition of gender identity. The approach was non-judgmental. It very much had a therapeutic focus. About 5% of the kids they were seeing would transition in adulthood. 70% would go on to be gay, at 16, if they were persisted, they were put on puberty blockers before at 18 being able to go on full cross-sex hormones and have their surgeries. So they're pretty shocking numbers, right?
Yes, absolutely.
One in 30,000, was it?
Yep.
Okay, so now moving into the mid-90s, the clinicians began looking at what was going on in Norway. No, Fema, you haven't missed anything important. Oh, right, I see it's the 4th there. Oh, sorry, Fema. You haven't missed anything. We're literally just talking about the opening of the Tavistock. We're on slide number 5 of 17, and we're going to make the slideshow available after the show. So welcome. So in 1996, so the mid-90s, the UK clinicians started looking at the Norway approach. Started convening, meetings about the standard of care and inviting the Norwegians over to the UK. And in 1998, the Royal College of Psychiatrists published new guidelines for treating these gender questioning children, which was to take a full family history, give extensive therapy, focus on comorbid conditions. If there were to be any physical interventions, they should be staged. And puberty blockers were advertised at this time as being fully reversible. Patients were encouraged to go through natal puberty, but then puberty blockers could be given at age 16 to, turn the hormones off and give the patients time to think. 16 was chosen because that is and remains the age of consent. Mm-hmm. It was thought that 16 would give the patient time to think away from the drive of their hormones before deciding whether they wanted to, go ahead and transition as an adult. GIDS was very much separate from endocrinology, whereas in the US, the endocrinologists ran the gender services with a focus on fixing the body. GIDS has always wanted to focus on, the mental health aspect. Anyone got any questions about that?
I just the GIDS and the Tavistock system is the system that's more favoured in our Commonwealth countries.
Yes. So yes, if you live in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, any Commonwealth countries, GIDS is the system that's been in use for years. So Queensland, I know, I've just announced an inquiry into their system, because all our systems are modelled off this, and it went disastrously wrong. So here's where we start getting into some issues in the 90s. The Portman Trust managed the adult services for adult transitioners, and that's all there had ever been, right? So GIDS and the Portman Trust come into conflict in the 90s. The Portman Trust was very uncomfortable with GIDS' approach, as they themselves had seen the high regret rate in adults as well as the high suicide rate in adults. The Portman Adult Services preferred a psychoanalytic approach, whereas GIDS did not. Portman were against the legal recognition of a patient's preferred sex. The adult services didn't even want to change the language, and GIDS were not following up on therapy options due to the geographic locations, due to the geographical barriers. So the Portman really came into conflict with GIDS very early on. That's why they moved to the Tavistock Trust and separated from the Portman. Okay, so now we're moving through the 90s and the early 2000s. HANNA starts exploring the conflict of interests that GIDS came under, such as parent groups like Mermaids and GERS, which is Gender Identity Environmental Research Society, I think it is. Pardon me if I've got that incorrect. GIDS were changing patient treatment guidelines based on Mermaid's advice, e.g. like changing the children's names and socially transitioning them. There was definitely a conflict of interest between doctors directly and Mermaids. Susie Green had the ability to pick up the phone and refer children directly herself. I mean, this is someone who runs a charity, not a doctor. And she also was calling up doctors, and if they refused to prescribe puberty blockers, she would try and have that overruled. So more children began being Mermaids believed, obviously, that medical transition was the only treatment pathway for children. More children are being referred for puberty blockers in the mid-2000s. GIDS weren't interested in the Portman's regret patients, and they were obviously because the treatment used to include meeting an adult trans person, which makes sense to me. But they just dumped that once they left the Portman. In 2000, the director of the Tavistock reports that GIDS were under pressure by different groups and people to prescribe drugs. There was no robust evidence to support the prescription of puberty blockers, and GIDS was not collecting any data or evidence either. They were not following up on whether the physical interventions were effective, not collecting data, and they were very isolated from any other child or adolescent service, such as CAMS, which is the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. In most Commonwealth countries, we have that CAMS service. In Australia, we have CAMS. That's, if you're a school teacher, that's where you report any child at risk. So over the next decade, about 1,000 kids would be referred for puberty blockers during this time period. Does anyone have any questions about that?
So that Mermaids and Susie Green, now that's the same Susie Green that Posey spoke about and got a please explain by the police over there, I believe. That's the same correct. Susie Green, the one that took her son to Thailand. He was underage. He was 17, I believe, when she took him to Thailand to be cut.
Well, that was so now let's have a look at what the Dutch were doing. So in the year 2000, the approach was, one, put them on puberty. They call this the early intervention, model. So one, the first stage is be put on puberty blockers at 12. Okay, then the cross-sex hormones at 18, and then surgery at 18. So pressure starts mounting in the UK by people like Mermaids and GERS to adopt this approach, because the Dutch were also saying, it helps them pass better as adults. parent groups were pressuring GIDS, saying families are going to take their kids overseas to receive this treatment if GIDS don't fall into line. The Dutch were downplaying the known effects of puberty blockers, saying they were reversible, and downplaying concerns about growth and bone density. They knew. So by 2008, this UK endocrinologists were recommending early intervention, saying it was actually unethical to withhold treatment. Okay, so this is where you get them using Gillett competency to give, a 12-year-old puberty blockers.
Yeah.
This is the point when the NHS began to medically alter the puberties of children based on their declared identities. These protocols gave little informed consent to the risks on pubertal suppression that the researchers were fully aware of. GIDS began an uncontrolled early intervention study, but they didn't wait for the results before rolling out early pubertal suppression. So now we're
talking about drugs that are completely off label here.
Correct. So it says at the beginning of the book, they were used for castrated males. It's the same drugs. They will result in they were used for cancer, prostate cancer. They are being used off label in this instance.
Yeah. So for example, I think one of the examples earlier on the book was say like headache tablets, paracetamol, for example. Giving it to children is actually off label. A lot of people don't understand that, but we can give half the dosage of it adults to a child. Even though it's off label, we know that it's going to be doing a similar thing. But with this, it's doing something completely different to what its label use is. And I think a lot of people really misunderstand that. It's not the same as here's a full strength medication. We're going to give a half course to a child. Technically, that's off label, but we're expecting it to do the same thing by giving that human that's half a size human, giving him half a dosage. Yes, that should. But we're talking about taking a drug and completely using it for something completely different that it was never ever designed to do. And I think that really needs to be amplified, that we're not talking like Panadol, giving it to adults and giving it to children. We're talking about taking these drugs that were literally made for people with cancer and also sterilizing them and giving them to children.
Okay, so now we're moving into sort of the 2010s. So the new era, from about 2012 onwards, I just call this the fire hydrant era because it just seemed to explode. So GIDS becomes nationally commissioned. The number of patients they were seeing grows from about 80 per year to about 150-ish. They open a number of bases, including Leeds, but practice actually varied widely across those locations. So they were talking about the doctor lottery. The service became being led by service users, special interest groups, and parents. So the unconditional support of the chosen identity of the child becomes the norm rather than the therapeutic approach. Kids are referred to blockers usually, they say in this period, usually up to 3 to 6 appointments. But, in the High Court case, it was found that sometimes it was no appointments, sometimes it was one appointment. That actually varied very wildly. There was no psychological work done with any patients because this mermaids and jurors were saying this is transphobic. You can't question the child about their identity. That would be transphobic. So they just throw the therapy completely out the door at this point. So at this point, there is no time to think. For kids, parents, and doctors, the solution is straight onto puberty blockers. Then at 16 you can go onto your cross-sex hormones, and then at 18 you can have your surgeries. And also, with the amount of huge growth they were having in this period, they weren't reflecting on their work. Another big thing was that there was no referral criteria. A lot of people could refer: school counselors, charities, teachers, and I think that's where we get these crazy numbers from. So if you're interested in those numbers from the fire hydrant era, I've done a slide with some of these crazy numbers. So you're welcome to go ahead and read. I won't bore you with that time, but with the whole thing. But let's have a look. So so the kids that they were seeing included the comorbidities and difficulties included non-suicidal self-harm, suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anxiety symptoms, psychosis, eating difficulties, bullying and abuse, psychological, emotional, sexual abuse and neglect. The three most common associated difficulties were low mood, depression, and self-harming. More than a fifth, 21.2% of girls had suffered abuse. So we're seeing really troubled young people, even kids whose own parents were sex offenders, and they're just not doing therapy anymore at all by this stage.
And they're not doing any background checks.
No, because that's considered transphobic. You just there was no questioning of the identity at this point. So at this point, JIDs, they're put on the puberty blockers at 12. So let's have a look at this. There's just some information about the puberty blockers here. On the third point, the long-term effects of using blockers in this way were largely unknown. Even those who had been working in the field for decades concede that the research in this area is poor. Polly Carmichael, who was the head of JIDS, admitted in 2019, "We have struggled in the absence of research to understand how the care we provide affects patients in the longer term and what choices they go on to make into adulthood." Her colleague also said the studies are limited in scope. So this is where we bring up the off-label point. So for those who wish to pursue medical transition, the route begins with a referral from JIDS to a hospital that houses pediatric endocrinologists. Then they will get the prescription for the gonadotropin-releasing hormones, which are the puberty blockers. These powerful drugs are licensed by medical regulators for use in children with precocious puberty, when children begin adolescence very young, before 8 for girls and 9 for boys. They are used off-label, not for a condition they are licensed for, in a treatment of gender dysphoria in young people. JIDS users are also provided with a drug called triptyline. All puberty blocking medication act on the pituitary gland to stop the release of sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen. This effectively halts the physical puberty, stopping the body developing secondary sex characteristics, and they're prominently used to treat prostate cancer in men, and have been used for male castration of male sex offenders. So they knew at this point what these drugs were, that there was not good evidence for using them in this context, and they were giving them out like lollies. So that's what the train came. You go in at 12, you're on the puberty blockers, then you're on to they could have the surgery as young as 17 in the UK. GIDS itself played no active role in surgical decisions. The referral for surgery to the NHS are made by the adult gender clinics. And young people in their care could only start cross-sex hormones if they'd been on the puberty blockers or are approaching the age of 16. So does that make sense to everyone so far?
So at that stage, Heather, there's two different parts to the puberty blockers, in my opinion. One part is this prevention of secondary characteristics, but the age of 17, 18, they're already starting to develop them anyway, right? So my opinion would be, are the puberty blockers at that point, when you're that age, just conditioning you to take a medication and conditioning you into this?
Well, this is what they ended up. This is what they ended up finding, that children that have taken puberty blockers, almost 100% of them went on to transition. So it really solidifies the trans identity in a child, 100%.
So we're looking at about 2014.
Yeah, this is the 2000s now. So it's just become a railroad of a process. There is no talking, there is no non-medical options, there is no therapy. There's drugs, and then when you come of age, there's more drugs and surgery.
Yeah.
So I think Sweden called it the trans train, that once you've, and there are actually examples in the book. Did you see that case study of the mother with the gay son with OCD?
Yes. And
the child clearly had OCD and anxiety and was gay, probably. That identity wasn't fully formed, and they just wanted to give her a script for puberty blockers, and she thought it was outlandish. They prescribed it over the phone because her son couldn't even leave the house to travel to London. So she was completely taken aback by that, and
that was during the COVID time too, wasn't it?
No, this was sort of in the 2000s,
before.
But like service users had noticed there was no therapeutic option for the majority of their cohort had some kind of psychological comorbidity.
But it didn't help them. It didn't help them getting out of the house.
That's correct. They still had they didn't know what the puberty blocker did, if it was effective or not. There was no evidence to suggest it helped in any way.
So I mean, they've gone from being a shut-in and then still being a shut-in. I mean, the social.
Well, no, actually, that woman saved her kid from possibly being castrated. He was just a gay kid with OCD. He wasn't a woman.
No.
And that case study was very telling. That
was that the one called Alex?
She realized straight away that her son was very troubled, that her son needed help with his troubles, and that she was very taken aback that medication was the only solution offered by GIDS. So just moving on to the next point, did anyone pick up any chitter-chatter about Munchausen's by proxy, FEMA, VF? Did you guys catch any of the catch Munchausen's mentioned at all in the book?
No.
Because it actually did come up. Its name has changed.
Yes.
So it's factitious disorder imposed by another, or FII is fabricated or induced illness. So then that's the new term for Munchausen's, which is when you make yourself sick for attention, and Munchausen's by proxy is when like a family or caregiver is making you sick for attention.
So this is how Hannah Burns refers to it in the book, but is this how it is referred to in other publications as well? Rather than Munchausen's?
I've seen a lot of Terfs talking about Munchausen's, so we should probably start using the correct terminology, which is factitious induced illness or factitious disorder induced by another. You know, we're looking at mums like Susie Green and Jazz Jennings' mother, and that's, you know,
well, I think that's really, I think it's important to note because a lot of gender critical people and TERFs will talk Munchausen's and know and understand what that is, where they may not actually understand that in publications it may be written down, because we do have our own language that we speak. So coming across these books and it's written in a different way can be a little confusing.
That's okay, VF. That's why you're here, babe. Okay, so she does bring it up. It gets brushed over very quickly. So there were cases where they felt that the push for medical intervention and transition wasn't coming from the young person themselves, rather from their family. Clinicians felt they may also be seeing fabricated or induced illness, which is, you know, where the child themselves wants to be, you know, sick. Like they did have presentations where children were saying, my mum wants this for me. There might have been sexual or domestic abuse in the child's background from their own family members. You know, the fact that your parent is a sex offender and you're presenting as gender confused, they just didn't think that warranted any psychological exploration. It's just absolutely crazy. So other clinicians relayed similar stories with similar outcomes, not just about suspected cases of FII, but where their clinical judgment was not to refer to endocrinology, but then they would be overridden and executive would refer to endocrinology because they didn't want to be seen to be upsetting families or appearing to be punitive in their approach. Most of the clinicians that worked at GIDS that Hannah spoke to said that they suspected at least one or two cases in each of their caseloads could have been FII or FDIA, which is concerning. So from November 2019, GIDS finally started recognising this as an issue and put in new safeguarding procedures. But you know, I worry about the victims that they did refer onto puberty blockers and didn't explore that with. There just seems to be no concern for those children out there. So now we come to the bombshell era. Sorry, are there any questions about that sort of section of the fire hydrant era? You can have puberty blockers. You can have puberty blockers. Oh, what? Your parent was a sex offender? Have a puberty blocker. You know? Oh, what? You learned this on a YouTube channel? Have some puberty blockers.
It's literally full-blown Oprah mode now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you dare question it, you're transphobic.
You know, literally, you got Oprah handing them out. Check into your seats. Everybody gets puberty blockers. But I literally think the Munchausen's problem is so much more severe than but also these gives credit to, because these women, these Munchausen mums, some of them are very good at what they do, very good
Well,
at
they
what
were
they
saying
do.
each practitioner probably has, you know, a caseload of a couple of hundred kids or a few hundred kids or even up to 1,000 kids. And they're saying each clinician probably had maybe 2 cases.
That's right. You know,
You
like,
know, that's insane. And they just ignored it for years and years and years. So from about 89 till when did they change that?
yeah,
2019. They weren't even considering that as you know, a possibility, which is, you know, as a former teacher myself, you know, that they didn't take that into account with their risk taking procedures is just mind boggling to me. Okay, so 2015 is when the cookie starts to crumble, when the house of cards starts to fall. Okay, so in October 2015, the referrals are blowing out exponentially. Why is that, guys? Chat, Stone, why are the referrals exploding?
well, what have I done? Sorry about that. I would say social contagion myself.
Yep. Also, what they say, you know, in the book is that there was no referral criteria. A lot of people were able to refer, not just doctors, and there was no screening process. Like, you know, so I've got a back injury myself, and even to get into a pain clinic about my back is months and months and months of screening to get into that support group,
See, this is
to
where we're
make
at
sure that
now.
the right people are being targeted. So the fact that there's
Yeah.
no criteria to be even referred, and lots of people can refer, and you know, this is why it's just
So
exploding.
this is
So
where
they
we are with the self ID too. HJ is they're letting, say, speech pathologists, for example, um, have a say in that child, in what they, you know. So as long as that person has known the child for 12 months, um, they can
no,
be a
no,
referee.
it wasn't even that. Someone from Mermaids could just ring up and refer a kid that had just walked in.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, people at Mermaids is a charity. It's a pressure group. They're not doctors. So teachers could pick up the phone and refer.
So this is where it gets
Um,
dangerous. If a teacher is hiding a gender personality from a parent, and now going ahead and ringing on behalf of the child.
Correct. Yeah, correct. So the referrals are exploding. The JIDS leadership commissions an external consultant, Femi Nangulu, pardon me if I don't have that correct, to advise on working practices. She recommends that they cap the number of referrals immediately. She's like, no, something's wrong here. What do? They bury the report. She makes a lot of other great recommendations as well. They bury it and keep rolling. Because this thing was also, you know, a big earner within the trust. In 2018, Dr. David Bell presents the Tavistock board with a new report detailing the concerns of 10 JIDS staff who had shared their worries with him as staff governor. He brands JIDS not fit for purpose. What do? They bury that report as well. February 2019, the Tavistock Trust commissions someone to investigate the concerns raised by Bell. So this is when Dinesh Sinha's JIDS review was published. The trust says it does not identify any medical issues in relation to patient safety or failings. So again, they just keep rolling and pretending like there's nothing wrong.
This is literally nothing
It's
to
not
see here.
until September 2020 that NHS England commissioned the CAS report to conduct an independent review into gender identity services for children and young people. Okay, so during this time period, before Hillary Cass, so between 2018 and 2020, the Kira Bell case comes up. What did you think of the discussion of the Kira Bell case in the book, everyone?
Is FEMA in here? Love to hear what FEMA's got to say.
I thought it was brushed over very, very. I thought the treatment was really light. She was barely mentioned.
It was
very sad, just some of her quotes. I regret all of it. I wish someone would have been there to tell me not to get castrated at 21, she adds. So, she gets seen in January 2013. She gets put on the puberty blockers, then the cross-sex hormones, then the then the surgery. It's just really sad what happened to her.
It's literally
that was
conveyor belt.
Another problem that they were having is that with the older adolescents that were coming in, with the older adolescents that were coming in, say they were like 15, 16, and they had been sitting on the waiting list since they were 12 or 13, they were kind of too old by the time their name came up on the list. So they would see them in these group consultations of like 30 kids and give them a piece of paper so that when they turn 16, they could go straight to adult services and get their hormones and their surgeries, saying that GIDS had assessed them thoroughly, that they'd, done their full histories, done a full psychological workup, when that was not the case. They were seeing these kids in rooms of 20 or 30 just to get them off the waiting list and giving them paperwork that said they had been seen by GIDS and that they'd been given the okay to go ahead with full adult transition, when it just wasn't the case. They were just trying to get these kids off their waiting list, the older adolescents.
A way, like what I said before about the age of consent, well, this is part of it. Having this whole thing of informed consent lowered the legal consent without lowering the legal consent, right? So now you've got these parents or caregivers or whoever going along with these young children, very young children, and agreeing without them having full knowledge about what they're agreeing to.
Yeah, I was just looking at FEMA saying I thought the discussion of Kira Bell was purposely minimised because it was political. Yeah, I agree. I thought it was very brushed over. I felt like saying, why can't you go and talk to her, Hannah? I mean, you live in the same country. Like, why wasn't Kira Bell interviewed for this book?
She seems like the perfect person to interview for this book.
Yeah, 100%. So let's look at something that just waiting for my new slide to come up. Can everyone see GIDS, the money spinner?
Yep.
So any of these, the good thing about this book is that these are all triple check facts. So she's double sourced and then she's put them through legal. So anything in this book that's got a footnote next to it that it's a fact, you can quote it. So GIDS went from being a supporting actor in the Tavistock Trust to being a leading lady, and its strategic objective it was a strategic objective of the trust to bring this about. JID's contribution to the Tavistock Trust income increased from 5.9% in 2015-2016 to 13.1% in 2021. So that's like over doubling its income in that short time frame of 5 years. When income from the Charing Cross Gender Identity Clinic is added, gender services account for, so Charing Cross is the adult service. So those two services combined make up almost 25% of the Tavistock's total income. This figure could potentially be as high as 28%, with the trust noting that there is added value of having children's and adults' gender services in the same trust, with gender services contributing around a quarter of the Tavistock income. That must have an influence. So, yeah, like what does everyone have to, how does everyone feel about that?
Well, literally, we're talking about a conveyor belt of getting as many through as possible. If you've got 30 people in the group, that's
flicking back to the Kira Bell, right down the bottom there. I was treated like a medical experiment. I was an unhappy girl who needed help. Instead, I was treated like an experiment. Okay, but this experiment is making a lot of people rich. Very rich. So,
God. We see it at all. We see that at all levels, Heather.
Mm-hmm. So I just thought that was really, worth mentioning. It is brought up in the book. It is worth mentioning. Okay. So what's the way forward now that the lid's been blown off this thing? So, when HANNA wrote this book, Hilary Cass hadn't done her review and JIDS hadn't been shut down. So it has been shut down now and deemed unfit for purpose. That first bullet point up here, pardon me. That first bullet point, Hilary Cass has a blog where she's publishing her updates on the systematic review. And if you want to know the latest about that review, please seek out her blog at that link. And she'll be delivering the full report by the end of the first quarter in 2024. So what's that, about
that's only
March,
weeks
April,
away.
May? Yeah, that's a few months away. Where does it seem to be going? I got the feeling from what HANNA was saying in the final two chapters, one quote that did come up, that it could be 10 years before we realize what's happened fully. In terms of heart problems, bone density problems, this sort of thing. I get the feeling that they're just going to keep going and that it's going to be very trauma-informed care, that they're going to tighten up the referral process. So, and they already have done that. So only GPs can refer now, and the person being referred must meet referral criteria before a referral is made, not just here's a depressed kid, here's a mixed up kid, here's, you know what I mean? They're going to fix this problem with the older teens, being sent to Charing Cross with paperwork saying that they'd been fully okayed for adult transition. I feel like they are looking to tighten up their consent documents. There were a few cases there that, something as simple as kids that have been put on puberty blockers can't have the pull-through method. What's that called? The penile inversion.
Yes.
They actually have to have the surgery
colon.
where it's basically like a bowel resection, which is a much more complicated surgery that has worse outcomes than the penile inversion.
That should be part of the consent, though, right? Like,
right.
if
So that this is what I'm getting. This is what I'm thinking they're going to do. So
if
they're
you're
going
on puberty
to better.
blockers, you need to know.
Yeah, they're going to tell kids about clitoral enlargement. About the micro penises, about all of that thing. I think they're going to offer patients fertility preservation. So they were supposed to be being offered fertility preservation if they were part of the early intervention study, but then the kids would go to the fertility clinic, and the NHS fertility clinic would knock back their referrals. So a lot of these kids lost their fertility without consent.
Again, they're not old enough to know the value of it, right?
Right. So I'm just going to tell you where I think it's going, according to HANNA. So children are only going to be put on puberty blockers if they're enrolled in the clinical study. And I sort of think, well, wasn't that what the early intervention study was for? And you still haven't followed up on any of that data, and all of those kids are out there, and you're not trying to track them down and see how they are and what the hell happened to their bodies. So
that's 30 years
I think they're going to say that you can only be on puberty blockers if you're enrolled in the clinical study. I think they're going to try and work more closely with CAMS, the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Care Service. I think they're going to make it regional. They're going to have centres around the country rather than asking families and children to travel to London. I think they're going to offer more therapeutic, air quotes, and holistic pathways, air quotes, including non-medical pathways, because they didn't even have treatment protocols for kids presenting as non-binary or kids that just wanted to have an aesthetic and not take any medication. Do you know what I mean?
Gender non-conforming, yeah.
I think there's going to be more non-medical pathways for kids like that. There's still, for me, and Kelly J. Keane has pointed this out, there's still huge questions surrounding Gillett competency. And that still remains unchallenged in the courts. So they're using these medications under under Gillett competency, but I still think that needs to be challenged in the High Court. The Kirabel case didn't actually challenge that particular legal question. Then there's questions about who was harmed by JIDs. Should they be found and compensated? Should they be followed up? The Tavistock seems unsure of the numbers. They won't give a number of how many were put on puberty blockers. They couldn't even give the High Court those numbers.
That's ridiculous, right? Like, there'd be so many different lists, pharmaceutical lists. You could get those numbers. If you looked, you could get those numbers.
100%. So that's just that's where she leaves it off, that we're going to, I sort of think, they were the things that were brought up in the book. And that's, to me, the way I can see it going ahead. I think they're just going to go ahead and tighten up all those aspects that I've listed on the way forward. What did you guys think, chat? I don't think they're going to stop.
Of course not. I think it get it out of the Tavistock, and that way there's not one body or you'd get it out of there.
No, they'll keep it in the Tavistock.
There's
but
not
they're
one
going
body
to
you can go
regionalize it.
after.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Therefore, you've got a whole lot of people involved more now, like individual GPs. Now they're going to be taking the responsibility of their patients rather than this centre that was literally just a conveyor belt centre of taking gender non-conforming children.
Well, I think they would say we're taking it regionally because that will allow the kids to access therapy if they want it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about the pros and the cons of the book now that we've reviewed it. Yeah, splitting into health authorities spreads the guilt around as well.
That's exactly. It's going to be harder to pinpoint one centre or one group of people within a centre to sue. Again, how hard is it to sue your doctor?
Mm-hmm. So, what did we like about the book? Can everyone just put one thing that they liked about the book? What I liked about the book is that someone took the time to document this, and it is double, triple checked, and everything in it is a fact. That's probably the one thing that I did like about it, is that you cannot fault her research, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
What did you enjoy about it, Stonewall? What can you give Hannah Barnes credit for?
Look, I'll give her credit for documenting it and having it so that it can at least be used as, like you said, it's triple checked. You can take this to, like if you're writing letters, for example, writing letters, you can quote some of this
facts from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do appreciate that. I have a lot more cons about the book than I have pros, but we do need to document it whether we like it or not. There's a lot of broken bodies out there that were literally just put on, whether it's that Swiss cheese effect, right? When you've got all the things in play, you stop things going straight through the system. And when there's like this, too many holes of the Swiss cheese line up, people get pushed straight through. There's going to be a lot of broken bodies.
Yeah, I agree with Fema. It was quite easy to read because it was, in order, and there was a sensible chronology. She does deserve credit for documenting what went on behind closed doors. Do I think it's definitive? No. Okay, let's get to my list. Do I think that it's filled with facts that you can take to the bank or to your local MP or to whomever? Yes. Okay, I think the influence of Susie Green and Mermaids and Jeers and these charities, I think they get off quite lightly in the book. I think Hannah reports on it, but she doesn't really give you Susie Green's background. Yeah, I got the feeling, Fema, in the trigonometry interview that she's so hesitant, like she's so careful legally about stepping on anyone's toes or pointing the finger, and it's she just is so softly, but I just feel like, come on, Hannah, like, we're talking about harmed children here. you know what I mean? I think her treatment of Susie Green and mermaids in particular was very light on. I think there could have been more information there about what type of character Susie Green is. Polly Carmichael, I think, gets very tiptoey treatment as well. I think she's a supervillain. I think she's still a supervillain, and I think she needs to be held to account. I mean, this woman swept stuff under the rug, report after report after report. If staff raised concerns, she would call them troublemakers. She would mark their files. I've been a government employee. She would mark their permanent files with insubordination complaints and this sort of thing. I think she gets off very lightly on this book and in the public sphere. I mean, Hannah BARNS is a journalist. I think very little attention was given to unhappy and detrans patients. I didn't really, she went and met people and interviewed them that were really happy with their transition, but did she go and meet a detransitioner? I don't think she did. She talks about Kira Bell, but she didn't actually go and meet any of these hurt young people.
So that's where I would like to say that her personal opinion was kept out of it, but was it? Because there wasn't an equal of interviewing both detransitioners and the
happy.
Successful.
I think there was very little attention given to unhappy patients or detrans patients. I think there was I think she has very little curiosity in the difference between adult presentations. Like she doesn't want to talk about porn consumption, paraphilic behavior, and perversion. She just doesn't.
A big issue I had with the book, and I don't know if anyone else picked this up, but was not referring to children and teenagers as children and teenagers, but constantly referring to children and teenagers as young people. And I actually I was really starting to get my back up about that as going through it. It's because it's really, really, really hard to get a visual, and I'm a visual person, when we're talking about young people. No, we need to be very clear about the terminology. That is a child, that is a teenager.
Mm-hmm. She uses female language for men, and this includes she calls Marcy Bowers a woman and uses female language for Marcy Bowers, who, I mean, come on now, Joe. Like, Marcy Bowers is,
he's up there with the top friggin' 10 most horrible, dangerous people on the planet.
Absolutely. Like, I just, and she also did this at the Sisters Salon event when she was, when the book first came out. So we'll go into that in a minute, that she used female language for a guest at their event. I really think there's this huge brushing over of the influence of social media, peer-to-peer information sharing, the influence of porn, the influence of the LGBTIA ideology and calling it an ideology, just a complete lack of curiosity about grooming as well. Like the social contagion, she just does not. And she mentions YouTube a few times. In the case study, she says, one of the kids had seen Buck Angel on YouTube and now has their own YouTube channel.
Yeah,
where
which they were
this kid
documenting
was
their
basically telling other kids how to get through the appointment process at the Tavistock and what to say.
word
And
for
she
word.
just does not, she kind of just drops that there and leaves it,
Didn't go anywhere else with it. You sort of go, okay, well, this will be
And
interesting.
that guy is he's now employed at the Tavistock.
No conflict of interest there at all.
Yes,
So is this person literally employed because they know how the system works? So you've got a perpetual motion machine now that's like literally the bird dripping its beak into the water, right? And we know how that we can manipulate through social media. So we've got this system of those manipulating each other as a perpetual sort of machine now, feeding back into the system.
Yeah, Fema. Yeah, Buck Angel. She just doesn't. She's not curious about, okay, these referrals explode right at the time when every teenager in the world social media is becoming an everyday part of their life, and they're following trends on social media. Like, there's just an absolute lack of curiosity in exploring any of those issues. Did anyone see the trigonometry interview with Hannah Barnes?
I didn't get a chance to look at it. I had
it was pretty painful. She's so careful. Like, she sits on that fence, like, you know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely. Susie Green's one of the worst groomers. Okay, so let's talk about this Sisters Salon event. Now, I just thought it was Julie Bindell and, Kathleen Stock getting their photo taken with this guy, Katie John, at the event that Hannah Barnes and Helen Lewis were launching their books, right? Can everyone see my screen?
Yep. Pros and cons of the book?
No, Sisters Salon.
No, it says pros and cons of the book.
Okay. I'll stop sharing. Hang on a sec. Yeah, I'll go back and just bear with me a moment. Okay, there I am. And then I want to go, how do I go back into StreamYard? And then I want to present.
I honestly think, I think Susan Buck Angel should be absolutely taken off the internet, along with Blair White. They shouldn't have internet accounts. I literally know a girl that went to school with my daughter who's had her boobs removed. So, I do not believe anyone like fucking Buck Angel Susan should be anywhere near fucking internet.
Okay, can you guys see this article here I'm looking at? Time to think. Yes, great. Okay, so what happened at the event? All right, so it was for Helen Lewis and Hannah Barnes to sell these new books, Difficult Women and Time to Think. Okay, so it was a mixed sex event.
So does that means it's open to anybody to attend?
Correct. So, obviously there were going to be parents in there. This is really important information to any parent that's got, an ROGD kid or a kid that's been through JIDS and might have been harmed. It turns out Sisters Salon didn't invite Katie John. Katie John was actually invited by Helen Lewis. So I'm just trying to find the part where Katie John interrupts. Pardon me. So they both give their talk about their books, and pardon me, I'm so sorry.
On your screen there, do you have the option to zoom in a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. I might go back to the PowerPoint because I actually think I might have had it in the PowerPoint. Oh, no, that's okay. Sorry about this, guys.
So I'll have to go back and watch the trigonometry. That's my bad for not checking that out. But just a lot of I understand that she's a journalist, and I understand that you want to keep your opinion out of it.
Oh, okay, here we go. Question time. So they talk about their books. They have question time. Okay, so Hannah, a woman said she wondered why the issue. So they've talked about their books and then they go into question time. This is really important. A woman said she wondered why the issue had become a left-right divide. She feels center left, but finds herself agreeing more with the right. Hannah responds, it shouldn't be a left-right issue. It can be true that people can transition as adults and live happy lives, she said. But at the same time, it can also be true that by not giving the right care to children, we can do harm. She said she wished we could separate child safeguarding from self-ID, which is an adult issue. These issues need to be separate for there to be any consensus. At this point during the event, a man stands up. It's Katie John, and says he bought Hannah's book at Christmas, and shortly afterwards, one of his children had come to him and said they thought they were trans. Oh, sorry, this was just a parent. He says, what do you think parents like me in this position with gender questioning children should do? Because I'm terrified and I don't know what to do. Apparently the audience applauded at this guy's question, and she said, thank you for sharing your story with me. This is what Helen said. I understand you want support for your kid. The one thing I would say that Katie John who is here tonight, does run some services for parents of gender questioning youth and speaks to them about the idea of slowing down. I would say the best practice that we know of is talking therapy, just to talk, and get to support. So, Hannah Barnes, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a clinician. Thank you for standing up. There are probably lots of parents in this room. Just keep the lines of communication open. Has suggested to a parent to go and speak to an AGP about about their gender questioning child. Because Katie John, this is a great piece if you get a chance to read it. Katie John, so he was invited by these women, not by Sisters Salon. So let's scroll right down to the bottom of the article. Katie John Wendt believes children as young as 5 should be actively taught about gender identity at school. He's vocal in his support for a ban for conversion therapy. He perpetuates the suicide myth. He uses women's toilets, even though he realizes he may be perceived as a threat. And he believes that in some cases, teachers should support a child's transition without telling their teachers. So this is who Hannah Barnes and Helen Lewis has sent this parent straight back to.
So platforming. They're a platform an AGP, a true. So my son wants to try marijuana, right? So the best thing for me to do if my son wants to try marijuana is go find my local crack dealer and introduce him.
This is something I also found with the book. There is I feel like they've just, with this trans kid, thing, they seem to have thrown the adult typology out the window, especially the adult male typology. So, if we're talking about early intervention, shouldn't we be thinking about, like getting these kids away from pornography and limiting their internet usage? And they just don't want to connect the dots. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's just such a lack of curiosity. Yeah, I think she's true trans, Femma. 100%. Anyway, that's all I've got to offer on the book. I'll make that PowerPoint available to everyone. Is there anything anyone from the chat wanted to add? Sorry, now I can actually jump in the chat now, guys. Sorry, I've because I was sharing,
darling. Thank you for
because I was sharing
your screen.
I couldn't comment before, so now I can actually have a chat about your thoughts and feelings. But
thank you for that that presentation.
Yeah, I just feel like it's I feel like why is there no push to track these children down as adults and compensate them? Start looking at testing their bone density. Like they're just like, oh well, we screwed up an entire generation of kids. Now we're just gonna make sure we have them in a clinical study. And I'm like, well, you did that once before. It was called the early intervention study. And do you know what I mean? I just don't think things are happening. I think what's going to happen is that clinics are going to limit their liability. They're going to tighten up their consent processes. They're going to offer alternative pathways. Yeah, I just feel like it's just like a really halfway. Okay, we it could take 10 years to find out the full effects of what's happened to these kids. Well, why aren't we tracking them down? Have they been compensated? What about those kids that were possibly in a Munchausen situation? Have they escaped their abuser? Yes, tracking down those kids should be a piece of cake for Ma, but they don't want to do it. There's zero curiosity about this. They say they don't know how many, they can't come up with a list. I think it's all just pushing it under the carpet and let's just move forward with better practice. I don't think they... Yes, a huge class action. So I think so too. You know, I just think there's such a lack of cure. Oh, we won't know the full effects of this until 10 years' time. And I'm like, well, why isn't anybody going and looking for these kids and telling them they need, some therapy and their bones checked and their brains checked? They know it causes brain damage. Like,
how is it not that they can't find that list? Surely you can go in and go, anyone that's been on puberty blockers between this date and this date. Thank you very much. I'm not the most intelligent person on the planet, but I can tell you where to find them.
So in the fire hydrant era, they were seeing like 1,000 kids per month. So it went from being like 80 kids a year to 1,000 a month. And they're saying that during that era where they were just giving it out like candy, they can't go and track back those kids and compensate them. And, it's just disgraceful. It's like, oh, nothing to see here. Moving on. We're just going to offer fertility preservation. We're going to tighten up the referrals. We're going to tighten up the consent procedures. We're going to and just move on.
So it's
there is just no hunger to have a moment of reckoning about this.
It's literally in any other industry, this would be absolutely pulled apart, taken down, people sued. The fact that they're not being...
Well, Kira Bell was even defeated on appeal. You know what I mean? So she won, but she didn't really. And Gillett competency, Kelly J. Keene's been talking about Gillett competency. If you don't know what that is, that's just, if your kid has a brain tumor, that means that you can give them radiotherapy treatment, or it's giving kids medical treatments that they need that are life-saving. Like, okay, we've burst the suicide myth now. We know that's not true. Like, how is this treatment life-saving? In fact, we know it causes harm. I just feel like Hannah Barnes and the women that she's surrounded herself with, this Helen Lewis, whoever she's rolling with, are trying to sell us a halfway fix. It's okay if adults transition. Well, the reason the Portman was not happy with the notion of a trans child in the first place is because they knew that the suicide rate, even amongst a tiny percentage of adults, was still very high. Do you know what I mean? Like, they knew. They absolutely knew. They do know still. And I just think, why is Polly Carmichael still at the Tavistock? She should be gone. Why wouldn't she answer questions about this book? Like, I just feel like the issue of orgasmia was also never really brought up. If you read that article about the Sisters Salon meeting that Hannah had with Helen Lewis, book launch or whatever you call it, a member of the audience had to bring that up. Do you know what I mean? Can a child consent to losing the ability to orgasm? like there was just a complete lack of curiosity that was not mentioned in the book at all. And I think,
Oh, we lost you, Heather.
who would take that away from their child knowingly? A child wouldn't know. Do you know what I mean? How can a child consent to give away something they've never had?
No, well, that's right. I mean, it's all very incompetent. The very fact that there isn't lists to be given out and had shows how incompetent it was.
Yes, iatrogenic,
If you can't hold a
but they
list,
did talk about, they absolutely talked about the name changes and the social transition being iatrogenic, that it's not benign. Thanks for that, Femma. That, if you change your kid's name, you put them in a dress, that's not benign. Oh, just let them wear the dress. That's not benign. That's actually cementing the identity.
absolutely.
They can't do anything, and they're happy to keep the brainwashing going. I think so, and I feel like these women, these writers, are trying to sell this to us.
They are, absolutely.
Anyone that questioned anything that went on at that Sisters Salon event, where an AGP was an esteemed guest, got their throats jumped down. But what the hell were Helen Lewis and Hannah BARNS doing, referring a parent to that man? The guy is pro-pedophile, pro-zoophile, pro-pedophile. What does he say? Look at all the things hebephilia, which is attraction to teenagers.
Teenagers, yes.
So Katie Word, this is in this great article that I was showing you before, uses a lot of words to describe himself. He's non-binary, bipolar, an ex-evangelical Christian, ex-missionary, suicide survivor, bibliophile, logophile, xenoglossophile, sebophile, oenophile, porophile, and morphiles. A link to his website leads to a page which speculates cheerfully as to whether hebephilia and zoophilia should be included under the LGBT banner. So this guy's, not only is he mad as a box of frogs, but what possible light could he bring to a debate concerned about child safeguarding and medical professionalism? Yeah, it is still all about the money. Yeah, I just think, like, yeah, look, temper your expectations if you're going to read this. Like, the facts are there, but there's no joining together of the facts. They still just don't want people to put this puzzle together.
No.
Sorry, I'm just reading some of the chat.
We got the Band United, and welcome, darling, welcome.
So that's what I think they're going to be trying to sell us. Truly, that last slide of mine, more holistic approach, tighter referrals process, tighter consent process, I think, and them having Katie John at the event, like, I just think, like, well, where are we now? It's all still okay. We just need to tighten the processes a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But fuck those kids that, got hurt.
Well, we know that there's a lot of children.
That's not my attitude, but that seems to be the attitude of the public. There is there's no interest in finding these people, offering them therapy, telling them what they should have told them in the first place. Yeah. Yeah, it was I just think, there's still a lot of cleaning house to be done. I was very upset about that Sister Salon event and Katie John being recommended as a person to take your child to, when he says openly that he's attracted to teenagers and he thinks that should be a part of the LGBT banner. I just think these GC women or whatever it is are trying to sell us a halfway, that adult transition is fine and that child transition is fine under the right circumstances with the right consent, referral processes, you know what I mean? Like it's and they just don't want to talk about perversion, pornography, paraphilic behavior. They just don't want to marry the trans child with the trans adult. They don't. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
If you're
yeah.
really doing early intervention on these boys, early intervention to me would be to get them off the internet, get them away from the pornography. Like, do you know what I mean?
Oh, mate, seriously, you go and do a surfing retreat with them. You get a helicopter and you dump them just past the break, and you say, "Keeping an eye on you, survive and get back to the shore."
Like,
mate.
Hannah, you've just referred this family, this troubled family, to what they call an egg cracker.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I just feel like, when are these people going to get it? I found it depressing in a way, very depressing. I just think they're just going to keep on keeping on, and they're not going to go and look for these kids that are harmed. What was the last line in the book? It was like, "Oh, have kids been harmed? Undoubtedly, but
It was literally like that, eh?
we're just going to keep on trucking." I'm just like, what?
I've written a book about it.
And
So
when I read about what had happened at Sister's Salon, no, it wasn't just those women taking a photo of Katie John. It was them inviting Katie John behind Sister's Salon's back. So Sister's Salon could not warn women about that man's presence, like women that have had experience with perverted guys or AGPs. Like, so they did Sister Salon dirty by not giving women the heads up and then apparently he just got up and started talking to everyone about his gender reassignment surgery after he talked about his how great his organization for children is. He started going into detail about his gender reassignment surgery when, sir, the conversation is about medical malpractice and, trans children and adolescents. Like, why are these guys still able to insert themselves in the conversation? Like,
it seems to be
regret and suicide. I mean, the Portman were bringing the Portman Clinic used to make them. This is when 5% of their cohort used to go on to 5% of all the kids they saw used to transition. 70% would be gay. Would go on to be gay men and women. This is when they used to do watchful waiting. and they used to take them over to the Portman and have them speak to an adult transvestite to kind of not scare the kids, but kind of show them a realistic picture of what life might look like. And that is that you might not, it might be a very socially isolating thing. It might be a very romantically isolating thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, the Tavistock no longer do that, introduce them to an adult trans person. It wasn't, it's the complete opposite of what Buck Angel does. They used to introduce them to the adult trans people to, I think, give the kids a bit of a, like, are you sure you want to do this? But even then, the kids were 16, 17, 18. They weren't friggin' 12.
But are they glorifying the tramper? That's the thing. It's one thing to go take them. Here's this fucking man.
No, the Portman were not. That's why there was a big split between the Portman and Jids, because the Portman were absolutely against the direction Jids were taking. Yeah. So yeah. That's my review. I mean, worthwhile for the fact of recording the facts and getting that story documented. But is Hannah Barnes a TERF? Probably not.
No,
definitely
no.
not.
No.
And are they trying to get us all on board with this halfway shit? I mean, if we're talking about, a medical scandal, where's the truth and reconciliation process been?
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? There has been no class action.
Once they've been through that conveyor belt and they've been dropped off the end, there is nothing.
I just feel like this is all about limiting liability, sweeping it under the carpet. Look, don't look the other way, and let's move on with exactly what we were doing.
Absolutely. Look at
and now we put all the liability onto the children themselves
and the doctors and the families, and
sucked in because we told you everything. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Fema. Yeah, I found but that article about what happened at the sister salons really important, I think, as well, in letting us know exactly who Hannah Barnes is, and who Helen Lewis is. So there you go. There's my book club for the week, guys.
And it definitely triggered other discussions and other rabbit holes for both yourself and myself there, HJ.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I just wonder why those JITS kids aren't getting together, collecting testimonies and going for a class action. I just feel like these pricks are trying to sweep it under the carpet.
Oh yeah, they want them not
what
to
happened to them and just and move on with what they're doing and have more victims.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
So it was very disturbing in that, like, when I was getting to like maybe into the 400s, I was like, they're not going to change a thing.
Not a thing.
I think they're just going to like not their core philosophy. You know what I mean? Is a trans kid an actual thing? Is the question they should have been asking. And now we're just going to go ahead with, we just need tighter consent processes and tighter referral processes, and we need to go and study the kids we're putting on puberty blockers. Well, how about going and tracking down the thousands that you already did it to?
You literally
because they don't want to find the harm.
That's right. You got nearly 30 years of documentation that has been already studied. Why? Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't want to know. They don't want the results that they found to get it out. That's
because that would shut it down completely.
That's right. They already know the answers.
Anyway. So let's have a talk about what we want to read next. Femma, you said you had some PDFs, and I also wanted to talk about Stone was behind on her reading about a week ago, and she found a PDF reader. So you actually put your PDF into it, and it reads you the damn book. So
Yeah, it's great.
I'd really like for Stone to share that with us, because talking books are a great way for working women and busy women. We're all busy. I think that's a great idea, and I'd love you to share that with us. And let's have a talk about what we're going to read next. Yeah, I think there is value in the facts there, Femma, just being able to open this thing up where you see a footnote, it's a triple check fact, and you can quote it. So I've got a lot of the really good quotes on that PowerPoint. So I'll get Stone to put that PowerPoint up, and you can copy and paste the facts from that PowerPoint and use it in your Terfy arguments. Absolutely, feel free to do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that, Heather. I'm really keen to start another book, and like I said, there's absolutely no shame in being a hands-on person and not being able to sit with a Kindle or sit with a book or that type of thing, because we are busy. So read a bit, put it through a bit through a PDF speaker. It doesn't hurt to be doing the dishes and getting a few pages done that way. Or in my case,
absolutely. So what was the name of that app?
It was TTS, I believe, the one that I use, and it's a great little app. It's free. You can have the option to buy it. There is an option to buy it, but you don't have to. It's a white square app with like a little voice thing, and it's called TTS PDF, and it's so good. You get an option to change the voice in it, to set the speed in it, which is absolutely fantastic. Which means if you're like me and you can listen to things a little faster, because we're Aussies and we talk fast anyway, it does have that benefit to it, to be able to set the tone and the pitch and the speed in which the AI reads it at. So it is a free one. They do ask for you to buy it, but if you just watch the little ad, it doesn't interrupt you within the reading. So you can listen to that easily for 2 hours and it won't interrupt your listening. But also, if you keep, I've got my phone here, but if you've got your phone or your tablet and you leave the backlight on, it will actually highlight the words as it's reading too. So it does have that advantage.
I'm so glad that we got the PDF, because personally, if I really enjoyed the book, I would have gone out and spent $25 on it. But after all the garbage that Hannah Barnes pulled, I probably won't.
And that's
I can't. I just feel like, I just feel like she's trying to sell a defense sitting option. After all the facts that she uncovered, I still can't believe the fence sitting position.
I'm blown away by it, because to me, I think the fact that I do give a shit, and that it's about children, it's very, very easily to have been grabbed back into that being compassionate and caring, and because we do care, how easy it would be just to come straight out of that and go, these kids, it's not their fault. We could use pronouns for them, like Hannah Barnes has done, but then you fall into that trap of, because they're used, you can justify using them, and that's where I have a little bit of an issue with the pronouns. And
I'm not calling Marcy Bowers a woman. Like, hello, the guy wants to put fish skin in men's perineum. He's a Frankenstein fucking sociopath. Like, I just don't think you have to show, like, I'm not showing Katie John respect. The guys are express interest in minors. Like, sorry. I just don't know why these women are constantly like, oh, we need the it was in that article. It said they wanted to have Katie John there so that the event wasn't protested. And I think, really?
What type of fucking excuse is
After
that?
everything they did to you, Julie Bindel, after everything they did to you, Kathleen Stock, you know, after everything they did to you at the Oxford Union address, at the Lesbian Project launch, you still think you need to acquiesce to this in any... They tried to destroy Kathleen Stock's career. They tried to, like, they threw a rave out the front of the Lesbian Project. Like, I'm just like, no, the time for acquiescing and knee bending to this shit is over.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, yes, it is happening to kids. But pulling our heartstrings is not going to make us all of a sudden go, well, trans is good in these cases. I just don't think it's ever going to be that way.
That seems to be the position they're taking, that
Yeah,
adult transition they have absolutely no problem with, and that child transition just needs to be tightened up. That's, you know, the message that I'm hearing from these women.
Absolutely. And it steps in, you know, perfect synchronicity with the swimming, for example, saying, oh, well, you know, nobody can swim unless they've gone through, been on the puberty blockers and didn't go through male puberty. You know what I mean? So when you look at this and you look at that, you look to that, you can see that it all fits in together like perfectly oiled machine, you know?
Mm-hmm. So what's to read this month, guys? Anyone got any PDFs or any suggestions?
Female, we're looking at you.
Yeah, I'm really interested in your PDF collection, Female.
Any recommendations?
And I was thinking I'd be happy to set up a Google group or something like that, for if we wanted some place to go to chat during the month about how we're going with the reading and how we're reacting to it. I'd be happy to set up a little Google group or something along those lines where we could drop articles and interviews and other related material to the text that we're actually tackling.
Mm-hmm.
But look, we might, we can, I can't see any suggestions coming up, so we might just stew on that overnight and
we'll have
make a decision, see what we can actually get on PDF.
So again, the rules are, it doesn't always have to be, say, like this book, the Heather Barnes book. We could also do The Handmaid's Tale or something like that.
So we can read fictional.
Yeah,
I'm happy to read fiction as well as non-fiction, guys. So
we might definitely want to do Germaine Greer this year. So that's definitely on the list that I would like to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we might just mull on that for the next 48 hours and we'll get back to you guys.
Absolutely, totally.
And we'll start our reading again, but I'm definitely going to look up that TTS. Oh, cool, band.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Which one? She's the female
That'd be
eunuch.
the female eunuch, and
score to get it secondhand. Gonna love that.
Yeah. So maybe Stone can put a question on her Twitter and you guys can respond to it with some of your suggestions, but we'll let everyone have a mull on that for 48 hours. Mm-hmm. And I'll also send Stone that PowerPoint. So if you're wanting to lift any of the quotes or information from that, you're more than welcome. But that's all I have for everyone today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that, HJ. I really, really appreciate it. It's so good to be able to have these chats and a breakdown of these books. You know, look, not everybody gets the chance to read them. So, you know, having a resident Smarty Britches on the channel is fantastic, and we can start putting these into a little playlist as we collect them and as we do them and as we grow our body of knowledge ourselves.
Okay, Female eunuch and menopause, Ben. That sounds great. All right, cool.
Yep.
Well, I might start gathering some of those titles, and we might have a vote. Or
Yep.
we've also got to see what we can get on PDF, because obviously
we like to do it on the cheap and the free.
Yeah, I don't want it to be prohibitively costly for anyone to take part in this, so
Absolutely, that's the rules of the game. So we do like to find the free PDF, and that does not mean that you can't buy the book. It just means that if you do not have the funds to buy the book, you don't get to miss out. So that is completely up to. I do not, as we've discussed before, because somebody on Twitter had a go at me for sharing the free link. I don't host the free books. I just share the link to the site that hosts the free books. So that is up to each individual person whether or not they want to purchase that book.
Okay.
Awesome. Well,
Oh my
thank you
God,
so much, everybody, for popping in. It was such a great chat.
Yeah, thanks so much for great, Ben. Yeah, absolutely. Everyone go on the PDF hunt and see what you come up with, and we might meet again in a day or two and have a talk about what we found and what we're but we need 12 books for the year, so everyone put your thinking caps on.
Yep. So throw me a DM over at X, and if you have any ideas for books, or if you just see me on X and comment underneath how I got this idea, we would thoroughly appreciate it. So until next time, HJ, we'll love you for now and talk to you later. Stay loud.
Stay loud,
Get your
everyone.
reading voice on. Get loud with your reading voice. All right.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
And HJ out. Bye.
Bye.